Hello, and thank you for joining my digital presentation. Today I'll be speaking on the topic of artificial interiors, exploring representation of the 7 elements of interior design on artificial intelligence platforms. My name is Jason Shields. I'm an assistant professor with the Department of Interior Design at the Faculty of Architecture at the University of Manitoba in Canada. And so I'd first want to thank the University of Madrid and Common Ground for inviting me to speak on this topic today. And so if you have not already, you can find the abstract on the web page. I would suggest you please review this prior to watching the presentation. So we'll jump right into it as we have only limited time here today. I first wanted to open up with giving a little bit of context as to how AI in architecture is currently being viewed. We look at two different examples here. The first from the Royal Institute of British Architects and the second from the American Institute of Architects. The Royal Institute of British Architects was noted as saying, AI presents exciting opportunities for the future of architecture in areas like design workflow and various kinds of calculations. However, there is also potential risks that we must consider and mitigate. The American Institute of Architects also noted there are elements of work where AI can complement and increase efficiencies. However, when it comes to stability, reliability, and functionality, you cannot substitute the expertise of an architect. And I think this will be reiterated as we move through the presentation today. So to briefly discuss what the idea of a text-to-image AI prompt or AI model is, the text-to-image AI models are a form of artificial intelligence that allow users to generate a digital image based on a text description, which is commonly known as a prompt. There's going to be 4 AI models that we look at today. These are the DALL-E 2, using the DALL-E API, the Stable Diffusion XL 1.0, and Midjourney version 5.2, as well as LookX using the LX Interior version 1.0 model. Each one of these is briefly described here, talking about the use of contrastive language image pre-training, also known as CLIP. This is used by both DALL-E 2 and Stable Diffusion. DALL-E 2 is a diffusion model, while Stable Diffusion is a latent diffusion model. Midjourney is also a diffusion model, but they do not provide very much source code information or information about its code and architecture. And LookX takes a bit of a different approach, but it is trained on architectural images specifically, while the others are trained on a variety of different images. And the LookX uses the architectural database known as ArchiNet to pull from its data set. Okay, so now that we briefly have discussed the idea of text-to-image generation using AI, I want to just very quickly go through the 7 elements of interior design, as this is what we'll be using as a means of analysis of the output interior images. The 7 elements of interior design are texture, space, pattern, light, form, line, and color. And so I'm briefly going to go over each one of these. First being color, and color can be used to define a form and give a sense of scale rather than merely provide a background. Color is an integral part of the world around us, and color can be used to create an illusion or emphasize dramatic architectural form. And below there is just an image of a few different colors. Form, which is also often synonymously used with shape, but the two are distinct. When we speak of shape, we are often referring to the outline of an object, such as the shape of a human body, a piece of furniture, or a building. Form, however, can be compared to mass, which is 3-dimensional and exhibits volume. And below you see an image there that talks about the primary elements of form, which consists of point, line, plane, and volume. The next is light, and I think most people will be familiar with this. The only thing to note here that as an interior design, we have an emphasis on natural, artificial, and lighting schemes, and these are very important elements to design. The next is line, and line is an essential element in the formation of any visual construction. Without lines, we would not be able to define shape, and that characteristic by which we generally recognize things. Line describes the edges of a shape and separate it from the space around it. In addition, the contours of these lines imbue the shape with their expressive qualities, and you can see an image below with an example of vertical, diagonal, horizontal, and curved lines. The next is pattern, and pattern is a decorative design or ornamentation of a surface that is almost always based on the repetition of a motif, a distinctive and a reoccurring shape, form, or color in a design. And so below you see an image there of 2 different approaches to patterns, one with an integral pattern and the other with an applied pattern. And below this is now texture, and texture refers to the visual or tactile characteristics of natural and man-made objects and materials. The terminology used to describe textural qualities is associated with both sight and touch, Tactile or actual tactile textures such as brick, sandpaper, or a wool carpet can be physically felt and represented as 3D qualities. And below you can see an image there of physical, visual, and material texture. And the last but not least is space, and this is often spoken of in relationships to people, their occupancies, and the time in which they exist. The fabric that holds these together is the human unit and its interaction with them all. And you can see some examples of different spaces below. So to begin this process of creating these AI-generated prompts, the first thing we looked at was taking these 7 elements of interior design and breaking them down to descriptive terms. The easiest example to discuss here is of course color, and these are the 12 most common colors in the English language. And so you see with each one of these, it's almost like a word bank has been created that is used to often represent that element. So now that we have determined those 7 elements and we have a brief understanding of what those will often entail, to determine each AI's platform's ability to interpret and visualize the 7 elements of interior design, variable sample prompts were produced. And each prompt would have variables that could extract from the previously shown example terms. And these are those previously shown example terms. This allowed for increased variability, reduced bias, and automated processing of example prompts. Each sample prompt and example term would be encoded into a Python script to generate the prompts. And so what you see here is kind of like a bit of a Mad Lib. We have 3 separate prompts, and the text that is located in red would then pull from the word bank that you see here. So for example, a photorealistic image of a space, we would use a word from the space box here. And so we could say either large or small or open and closed. So a photorealistic image of a large interior environment. That's how this kind of variable prompt system that I've created works. And so to actually give that to function and to have less human input in that to reduce bias, I created a Python script. And so I'm briefly going to go over this here. At the top here, you can see the sentence structure with the variables inserted into it. Below here is those variables. So that's the exact same thing as that word bank we looked at previously. This is the script that will begin to generate the actual sentence based on the word bank as well as the prompts. And then this is the one that just randomizes it, so it ensures that every time the script is run, you don't simply get the same answer. In this example, there is 544,000 variables, so you'll receive one of 544,000 from the prompt. So what does the script do exactly? So it automates the prompt creation and inputs directly into the available API sources. The script can assist in reducing bias as each variable is randomized every time the script is run. This code then saves the image file and prompts to a graphic and a text file on your hard drive, and it automatically renames all the files to match that final prompt. If, for whatever reason, it was unable to save to the drive, it also provides a backup image URL, which lasts for 1 hour. And you can see the script here. In this instance, we run the script. It actually tells us how many total answers are available, which is 554,000, and it took 1.31 seconds to calculate that. Just to give a visual idea of to what is being output, it shows 20 random answers that it's pulled from here. And then if you type the word AI, it will randomly select one of these 20. It will send it through the DALL-E API, and it will produce the image for you. So you don't even have to go onto the web or anything. So just to very quickly go over everything that we've talked about here. First thing that we looked at were those example terms, which is that word bank, as I was calling it. There's the variable sentence template, which is seen on the slide after that, which has the red text that needs to be inserted. Using that custom Python script, we take the 3 sample prompts that we previously discussed, and using that script, we can now save the images, we can output the structure, and we get the 1 hour URL. And so for those platforms which do not have an API provided, we can then pull from that saved file and input the prompt into each one of the other examples. So remember, we'd be looking at DALL-E 2, Stable Diffusion XL, Midjourney, and LookX. And so each one of those would have the exact same prompt sent into it, and then an analysis would be done of those 7 elements of interior design. So this is just kind of an overview as to everything we'll be talking about today. So I'm going to very quickly go through these. This just gives you an idea as to the size and the general characteristics of the files that are produced by each one of these AI models. This first being the DALL-E API. The second being the Stable Diffusion XL, and this should not be confused with Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion XL is actually a new model that recently came out and has increased capabilities. This is the Midjourney example. And here's an example of LookX using the LX Interior version 1.0 model. In this instance, it's just, again, it's showing you what that script is. And then you see below at the bottom here, here's some examples of how putting in the same prompt into the 4 different AI models can really produce some different content, and the quality of it varies between each. And that's what we're going to start to look at next. So just bear that in mind. So what we have here is that we have 3 prompts, as we had talked about previously. For the purpose of this presentation and the amount of time we have, we're going to go over 3 samples from each prompt. So 3 prompts, 3 samples. It's going to be about 9 slides that discuss this. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, so feel free to come back and watch them afterwards. The first is the photorealistic image of a closed interior environment with design language primarily consisting of polygonal forms, provide bright natural lighting and various pink furniture pieces consisting of expressive curved lines, includes chevron pattern flooring and walls with natural textures. And so what we see here is first and foremost, DALL-E 2 didn't really give us an interior environment. I suppose this is a closed interior environment, but each one of these, besides DALL-E 2, is able to represent what we're asking, I think, much better. An example being the chevron pattern flooring that's seen in the LookX, and the fact that all the rest were able to actually produce some pink furniture. So as we go through these, just kind of keep in mind and keep your eyes peeled, but we will finish this off with a discussion of how each one of these sample prompts was able to represent those 7 elements. Again, DALL-E 2 kind of taking a bit more of a unique approach, to say the least. I would say it's not as generally accurate in this instance as some of the others here. And I'm going to fly through these pretty quick here. Here's another example, and I think what was interesting here is we requested brown furniture pieces. All of them were able to give us brown furniture pieces, again, except for DALL-E 2. We also asked for expressive curved lines, and I found that Midjourney did a very lovely job of that in this instance. DALL-E 2 did a pretty good job as well, too. So this is the second prompt in the first sample, and I think the one that I wanted to talk about here is the second portion of the sentence where it says, ensure architectural design language emphasizes diagonal lines throughout. And the only one that was successful at doing so was Midjourney version 5.2. All the rest really didn't begin to integrate that. They were able to put some stripe patterning material, but again, we asked for this stripe patterning material to be on the furniture, not on all of the walls. This is an interesting example, as the DALL-E 2 API gave us kind of a black wall. We really can't see too much. I really can't fully understand what's occurring in that image, and so it clearly is not able to accurately represent some of these elements. Below, Midjourney 5.2 comes out as kind of this almost surreal movie-like or video game-like environment, which I would argue the construction and feasibility of this may not be true to life. On the right here, we see Stable Diffusion XL and LookX. And they've taken a very conservative approach as to how they're showing interior environments. The top being kind of this living area, and the bottom also, or top being a dining area of sorts, and the bottom being this kind of living area. Okay, and again, in this instance, DALL-E 2 had some issues actually showing the interior environment itself. It was able to accurately show these hexagonal forms, but it's very hard to discern what it's trying to tell us. Well, the Midjourney 5.2 did a much better job of this, but again, it's still feeling very surreal. LookX and Stable Diffusion, once again, taking a bit more of a conservative approach as to how it wants to produce interior environments. Okay, and this is the last prompt. So this is prompt 3. This is the first sample of that. What I think should be noted here is that we have much more variables. And so makes life a little bit more difficult for some of these AI models. And I think what's interesting is DALL-E 2, again, we asked for a photorealistic image, and it gave us almost like a cartoon-like image. So DALL-E 2 is really kind of struggling with some of these elements of interior design requests that we're placing within our prompts. The remaining images from Midjourney, LookX, and Stable Diffusion all have kind of a similar quality to them, which is something that we hadn't seen before in the previous examples. Okay, and in this instance, it did a good job representing this blue almost in all of them. The unique portion of this one, I think, is how the typological aspects of each one of these seems to differ quite wildly. With Stable Diffusion XL creating a restaurant almost, Midjourney looking at it as like it seems like a hotel nearly, and then Look X kind of taking that basic approach again and just giving us like a bare bones interior space. Dolly 2 in this instance was able to insert a scaled figure, a human, which this was the only instance in which that occurred. And so I found that to be quite interesting, where all of these are just, there's no people in them. Wait, and the final sample that we're going to look at here today, again, Dolly 2 really struggled here. We asked for pink and brown colors, and it gave us purple. So arguably Midjourney, I think, did the strongest example here, although it's quite almost like a sci-fi approach. It's a very unique, and Stable Diffusion kind of went a little bit further than it normally does here. And so from this, we were able to determine that, you know, the more information that we prompt into Stable Diffusion, the more unworldly things kind of become. And Look X, again, taking a fairly basic approach to this. So some general comments on each of the output methods, and these are just some basic comments for time's sake. Issues are evident with Dolly 2. Some spaces do not fully depict interior environments, and the images lack photorealism in some instances. And this is this was the only AI image generation which attempted to include a human figure. The Stable Diffusion XL had some fairly high levels of realism with strong lighting and inclusion of furniture. Midjourney, the output was often quite surreal, and I question the feasibility and constructability of this. It also lacked an API or a web UI, and so work had to be done through a Discord bot, which I found to be a bit odd. Look X, the environment is often kind of static, and almost all of them use this similar kind of heads-on view. The design is usually quite simplified and modernist. So just to show you, this is all the samples from the first prompt. So prompt 1 using sample 1, sample 2, and sample 3. Now you've seen that we were able to go through each one of those images, and we look at 3 different things here. Is that element accurately represented in the generated image? Or was there an attempt to generate the element but was not successful? Or was the element not evident at all in the generated images? And we're going to go through this fairly quickly here. There's going to be 3 charts. Here's the second, which looked at those sample prompt 2. And the next is sample prompt 3. We began to analyze that. And so what we found through that, and again, this is a bit of a redacted approach to it for time's sake, is that none of the selected platforms can consistently accurately represent the 7 elements of interior design. Dolly 2 was unable to accurately represent interior design elements in most examples, and Midjourney was noted as being the most successful. Line, pattern, and texture were noted as the less accurately represented elements, and color, light, and space were the most accurately represented elements. Dolly 2 generally had the least accurate output based on the prompts, and I think that was pretty evident from us just going through this presentation. And texture and pattern were often misrepresented in all but one of the output images from Dolly 2. Stable Diffusion XL often had difficulty representing the element form. It was successful at representing color in almost all instances. Midjourney version 5.2 was the most accurate of all of the tested platforms, and almost all of the images were successful at representing color and light. However, it is arguably somewhat the least realistic, as again, when it comes to constructability and feasibility of the space, I have concerns as to what is being output by Midjourney. Look X, LX Interior version 1.0, had difficulties with the third, more detailed prompt, and pattern, texture, and space were often misrepresented. So some quick concluding thoughts. This is a rapidly evolving topic with more platforms and data sets appearing every day. There's a continued concern about the accuracy of images being produced using AI. Generally speaking, there's a lack of trust. Concerns from both professional and academic disciplines in architecture are becoming more notable each day, and concerns regarding copyright and ownership of said images is also a major concern. As briefly mentioned, there's also some concerns regarding the construction feasibility of these output AI images. Can these actually be built? And you kind of see this question mark in the wall here, and I almost like that as a posed question. I think in many instances, yes, they can be built, but typically in interior design, we do this based on drawings and detailed drawings so that we know the constructability of items, objects, and space. But the AI platforms cannot produce that information. These are simply producing images based on the prompt. There's an increased adoption by professionals and academics and increased use by students. So I think this AI gen content is still in an early phase of mass adoption. And what we're even beginning to see is AI models that create three-dimensional space. And I think that's going to be a very exciting and a very enriching approach to AI for architectural fields. Here's just a few of the references of some of the theorists we were talking about today. And at this point, I would like to conclude the conversation and presentation. I hope to see you in person at the presentation in September. And thank you again for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to reach me. My email is at the bottom. Thank you again, and I wish you all a terrific day.